In the last episode, Roberta and her team found strange symbols in the jungle and followed the markings all the way to a city, but then a large group of zombies came after them, and they didn't want to keep fighting, so they had to run away. Fortunately, they found a building that blocked the crazed zombies. Once inside, Roberta and her companions discovered an underground entertainment venue with all sorts of amusement facilities, each more unique than the last. Even a simple game of Russian roulette was played with a twist. Upon seeing a dancer, Doc was so mesmerized he couldn't move, wishing he could steal his eyeballs and place them on the beauty. If not for George dragging him away, Doc's soul would have been hooked.
It's like she looked into my soul.
Sure she did, buddy.
Even as he was pulled away, Doc couldn't resist looking back. At that moment, a duel was taking place ahead. Two men each loaded a bullet into a revolver. At the host's signal, they pulled the triggers simultaneously. The man who got shot was sent flying several meters before stopping at another man's feet.
We have a winner!
To their surprise, it was Murphy. He then took the shot man to the stage and declared the shooter the winner. This was the legendary Hell's Edge, where no rules applied. Murphy then distributed cookies to the winner. Here, Talker's biscuits are hard currency. Just then, Murphy spotted Roberta and her group.
It's about time you kids slaughtered your way here. Duck! Welcome to Limbo!
Through conversation with Murphy, they learned that this area was ungoverned, leading many talkers to hide out here. Following the principle of hospitality, Murphy had taken in many talkers. He then led them to the basement, where many talkers who had escaped from Altura were hiding. There, George saw a familiar figure. It was Dante's wife, Marjorie. A group of talkers surrounded George. She might be the only human they trusted. Doc asked Murphy how these talkers had escaped to this place. Murphy said he wasn't sure. He only knew that every so often, a large truck would drop talkers at his doorstep. He wasn't curious about who did it. As long as it brought business, it was fine by him. Murphy then shared a big secret with Roberta. He had once seen Roman in Zona. Roman was a deranged madman, and Zona had sent him away to establish another base, which now seemed to be Altura. Just then, the talkers suddenly became unstable, and even George couldn't calm them down. They had no choice but to quickly leave and lock the talkers up. Then they went to the entrance to wait for the mysterious person transporting the talkers. They stood by the window, ready to capture the transporter for questioning. Just then, the truck carrying the talkers arrived. Suddenly, Murphy sensed Lucy's presence. Ignoring Roberta's advice, he dashed out recklessly. Seeing this, everyone immediately followed. When Murphy opened the truck door, to their surprise, it was Addie, who had been missing for a long time.
Well, of course you're the big red one.
Then they went inside to reminisce. Murphy apologized to Addie, regretting not being able to protect Lucy. Hearing this, Addie broke down. To lighten the mood, Murphy ordered them some fine wine. The next second, a female blend grabbed a large bottle of wine, chugging it down. Then Murphy picked up his glass. Before Doc could react, the female blend's belly began spewing wine non-stop, leaving Doc in awe. He couldn't help but admire Murphy's flair for entertainment. Then Wesson found Murphy and reported a problem in the basement. Murphy immediately called for Doc's help. They cautiously headed to the basement, only to run into Dante's wife. Seeing her, Doc wanted to comfort Marjorie, but she suddenly roared, scaring Murphy and Doc into hugging each other. Fortunately, Marjorie didn't attack. Doc and Murphy hurriedly followed her, knowing they needed to lock up the talkers to prevent chaos. They searched for a long time but found nothing. Then Murphy spotted talkers in a corner. They lured the talkers into a warehouse and locked them up again. Seeing the frenzied talkers, Murphy decided to feed them some cookies. Meanwhile, George found Addie and thanked her for helping the talkers. Addie responded it was nothing. She just felt pity for them and helped them smuggle on her way. Then George asked Addie if she had seen Dante. Upon hearing Dante's name, Addie became agitated, asking if they also wanted to harm him. Despite Roberta's persuasion, Addie refused to reveal anything and then left the place directly.
Wait, please.
Hold on. Hang on, give me a second.
At this moment, Murphy took Doc to the bar to get some cookies to feed the talkers in the basement to prevent them from going mad and destroying the place. But after searching for a while, Murphy couldn't find a single cookie. Then, Doc noticed all the cookies were on one man's table. It seemed Murphy's store inventory had been won by him. Murphy then came up with a plan and led Doc to the dressing room. After a short while, they emerged in dazzling outfits, ready to make their entrance. They approached Ralph, ready to engage in a high-stakes gamble. Ralph agreed after seeing a box of ammunition, but on the condition that Doc's hat was on the line. Doc agreed on the spot. Then came the tense gambling round. The beauties around started to cheer for Doc, but Ralph quickly won with a straight flush, leaving Doc defeated in no time.
Well, if I keep playing, I'm bound to win something. I don't think you understand. This guy's so lucky he shits rabbit's feet. Why you gotta say that? You're messing with my mojo.
I do like that jacket.
Meanwhile, 10K reached the place where Roberta and her group had passed by and saw the graves they had made. Then, 10K bandaged his wound with a piece of cloth he picked up from the ground. Just then, a zombie approached from behind. Thankfully, 10K's quick reflexes allowed him to grab a stick and deal with the zombie. Then, another zombie approached from a distance. 10K, upon seeing it, raised his gun to aim, but with one hand missing, he could never hit it. It wasn't until the zombie got close to him that he was able to kill it, which only added to 10K's frustration. Back to Doc, he had gambled away even his underwear and had nothing left to bet. In desperation, Murphy took up the deed to his shop, willing to gamble one last time with Ralph. If Ralph took all the cookies, Hell's Edge would be finished. After seeing the deed, Ralph signaled to deal the cards. This round was a gamble on all of Murphy's fortunes. Consequently, Murphy began to use his abilities, employing his blend minions to peek at Ralph's cards. Then, with a knowing smile, Murphy signaled Doc to swap 2 cards and go all in. Ralph, thinking he had a sure win, showed his cards. Doc did the same.
House wins!
Ralph, furious, accused them of cheating, but he had no proof. So, he started to devour the cookies on the table. While Murphy and Doc were celebrating, they turned around to find Ralph had eaten all the cookies, infuriating Murphy. But then, Ralph suddenly felt very sick, and his shirt buttons began to burst open. Shockingly, Ralph's stomach exploded from overeating. Elsewhere, Addie, who had run out, was attacked by zombies. Fortunately, George and Roberta arrived just in time. They formed a triangle back-to-back, resisting the zombies. Together, they quickly annihilated the zombies. Then, George explained to Addie that she was Dante's friend and hoped Addie could tell them Dante's whereabouts. With Roberta's assurance, Addie agreed to George's request. Soon, they reached a highway. Addie picked up a rock and started knocking on the ground. In the next second,
Dante?
Hey, George.
everyone gathered to ask Dante about the explosions. Dante claimed he wasn't responsible for the explosions. He was hiding to avoid assassination. After a discussion, they plan to go together to fight back against Roman. But before they do, Dante wants to see his wife. When Roberta and her group returned to Hell's Edge, everyone was busy cleaning up the cookies that had burst from Ralph's stomach. Doc had just changed into new clothes. Then, a gunshot rang out. George quickly hid Dante. Soon, several armed personnel appeared. They were Altura's militia. Captain pressed a gun to Murphy's head, demanding Dante's whereabouts. Just as Murphy said Dante wasn't there, Dante's wife, Marjorie, ran out of the basement. Seeing her, Captain took Marjorie hostage, forcing Dante to show himself. For Marjorie's safety, Dante surrendered, but in a despicable act, Captain shot Marjorie dead on the spot. Seeing this, George wanted to desperately intervene but was stopped by Roberta, who said, "If you get caught, you won't be able to help Dante." After the militia left, George knelt beside Marjorie's body, swearing to rescue Dante. Just then 10K walks in. He follows Roberta's trail and manages to find the place. Doc saw 10K's broken hand and asked what had happened. 10K didn't say much, just mentioned an accident, which made Doc very worried. 10K then reported that Altura's people were spreading zombies everywhere. Everyone was puzzled by Roman's motives, but they agreed the immediate goal was to stop him. After discussing, they decided to split up. Roberta and her team would go to the cookie factory to see if they could make cookies to control the talkers, while Doc and George would head to Altura to rescue Dante. On their way to Altura, Doc and George unexpectedly hit a zombie,
No shit!
causing the car to break down halfway. George was accidentally injured by the airbag, the intense pain making her momentarily unable to recover. Seeing the situation, Doc took out a cigarette and lit it, then he burned George's airbag. He then offered George a couple of drags, claiming it to be the best painkiller in the apocalypse. Just then, Doc noticed zombies approaching from behind. so he got out of the car, ready to fight the zombies.
Cars used to have ashtrays?
After clearing the zombies, another one suddenly sprang out from the woods. For George's sake, Doc once again engaged in a struggle with the zombie. But this zombie was tough and immensely strong, and after only a few moves, Doc was pinned against the hood. In a critical moment, George took action and killed the zombie on the spot. On the other side, Roberta and her group drove to the cookie factory, with Murphy smelling brains from afar. They cautiously entered the factory, and Roberta signaled for everyone to split into 2 teams. Afterward, Murphy and Roberta arrived at the processing room, where the workbench was covered with scattered skulls, suggesting the place had not been in operation for a long time. Suddenly, a man ambushed Murphy and Roberta. Due to Gilly's fierce gunfire, Murphy and Roberta had to hide. Meanwhile, Addie and 10K were also attacked by a stranger, who appeared to be crying and scared. At this moment, Addie signaled 10K to draw fire while she took the opportunity to flank around. Then, seeing no movement, the man stuck his head out to check, but in the next second, 10K grazed his face with a shot. Addie also flanked around and captured the man. The scene returns to Murphy, who surprises him by standing up and attacking Gilly. Gilly used the terrain to dodge, but unfortunately, Murphy quickly ran out of bullets. Gilly then pointed his gun at Murphy, giving him the choice between becoming a zombie or a talker. Just as Gilly finished speaking, Roberta, who had flanked around, pointed her gun at Gilly's head. Gilly, unfazed, stated that no one had the upper hand in this situation. However, at that moment, 10K and Addie emerged, holding his brother hostage.
Hey, bye. That you, brother? Hey, bye. This crazy woman here done bust me right in the hunker.
With no choice, Gilly surrendered. During their conversation, the misunderstanding was cleared. A week ago, a group entered the factory and started shooting indiscriminately, leaving only the 2 brothers alive. They had mistaken them for those attackers. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Roberta explained their purpose. She mentioned that many talkers were going crazy without cookies, and she hoped the Gilly brothers could make more. After hearing this, Gilly said it was now impossible because his mother was the only one who knew the recipe, and she had already turned into a senseless talker. It seemed someone didn't want them to continue producing cookies, but in order to prevent the talkers from being slaughtered, they must obtain the recipe. The Gilly brothers, not wanting to hurt their mother, decided to steal the recipe. Murphy used a radio to distract the zombies, while Scully quietly approached their mother to steal the recipe. Scully managed to complete the task without incident, but as he were about to leave, he slipped and fell. Before he could escape, Scully was bitten on the neck by a zombie, and even the recipe was swallowed by their mother. Now everyone was at a loss again, not knowing what to do. After a brief contemplation, Roberta suggested directly feeding them fresh brains to restore their humanity. Just then, zombies attacked, and together, they began killing the zombies. After clearing the zombies, Gilly extracted their fresh brains and fed them to the crazed talkers. After eating the brains, the workers turned back into talkers, regained their humanity. Then, the mother told Roberta that making cookies required not only brains but also a special flour shipped from Heartland. However, this flour had been out of stock for half a month, and without it, they couldn't make cookies. Hearing this, Roberta instructed Murphy to take them to Hell's Edge while she went to Heartland to investigate the special flour. If she could bring the flour back, they could make the cookies themselves. Meanwhile, on their way to Altura, Doc and George found the vehicle that took Dante. They carefully inspected it and found everyone inside was killed. But fortunately, Dante's body was not there. While George felt relieved, she suddenly found a barrel by the road with a warning about the fate of traitors. Seeing this, George felt uneasy, and her concern was confirmed when she found Dante's glasses nearby. When George opened the lid, she found Dante dismembered and then, heartbroken, ended Dante's suffering.
I give you mercy.
Then George dug a grave for Dante, swearing in front of the tombstone to avenge him.